Let's dive into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. According to the story's timeline, this is the sixth movie in the MCU. 2011's Thor, as the undisputed strongest warrior in the Avengers, Thor's journey is undeniably an epic filled with trials and tribulations. As the eldest son of Odin, king of Asgard, Thor grew up basking in his father's glory. He witnessed firsthand his father's extraordinary courage and wisdom in defeating the frost giants who had invaded Earth, scripting a grand saga of safeguarding peace across the 9 realms. Although this victory cost Odin one of his eyes, he successfully secured the frost giants' casket of ancient winters in Asgard's treasury, completely crushing any possibility of rebellion for generations to come. These heroic deeds were etched deeply into young Thor's heart like a brand. However, fate often turns in the most unexpected moments. Odin, the wise and imposing monarch, had grown old and was considering stepping down from the throne.
I'll hunt the monsters down and slay them all. Just as you did, father.
A wise king never seeks out war. But
Yet, to his dismay, Thor was still so young and battle-hungry, forcing Odin to rein in his son's immature impulses. What Odin didn't foresee was that his words would be the spark that ignited Loki's burning ambition for the throne. As for Thor, the simple-minded, good-natured young man, he only caught fragments of his father's speech and failed to grasp its deeper meaning. Time flew by, and Thor gradually proved himself on the path of growth, achieving countless victories in battle. His extraordinary feats earned him the respect and fear of his people. Odin even bestowed upon him the Mjolnir, a symbol of supreme honor and power, further solidifying Thor's status among the masses. At long last, the day of Thor's coronation arrived, and all of Asgard was engulfed in celebration. With the people gathering around Thor's mother Frigga and his friends could barely conceal their joy and pride. Yet, in this atmosphere of festivity, only Odin's gaze remained cold and profound. Deep down, he continued to harbor doubts about whether Thor was truly ready to be king. However, time waits for no one, and Odin, knowing his days were numbered, had to face reality. In the end, he chose to relinquish the throne at this moment. But on this day of celebration, not everyone was caught up in the joy. Loki, who also had the right to the throne, was filled with resentment and anger because he believed that Thor was only able to ascend to the throne because he had been born a few minutes earlier than him. In order to reclaim what was rightfully his, Loki devised a secret plot. Loki found the leader of the frost giants and revealed to him the secret of where the casket of ancient winters was kept. They made a deal to launch a surprise attack on the day of Thor's coronation. 3 elite frost giants easily broke through Asgard's defenses and headed straight for the vault. However, Odin was aware of everything. With a simple wave of his staff, a massive figure instantly appeared in the vault, and with just one glance, it wiped out all the invaders. Although the casket of ancient winters remained intact, Thor's coronation ceremony was cast under a shadow. Thor, furious, accompanied his father Odin to the vault. Witnessing the sacrifice of the guards along the way, he swore to avenge them. Yet Odin, thinking of the bigger picture, stopped Thor's impulsive actions. This led to a heated argument between father and son, and all of this was seen by Loki, standing silently to the side, secretly pleased. Because Loki knew his plan had succeeded, he had successfully sown discord between father and son, anger and disappointment boiling inside him. Thor had no place to vent his frustration. He could only flip the table to vent the anger burning inside him. To Thor, his father had become weak, overly cautious, and afraid of death. At this moment, Loki appeared by Thor's side, pretending to be caring, and with just a few carefully chosen words, he stoked the flames of anger within Thor. Thor decided he would no longer sit idly by. He quickly gathered his friends and comrades, and they marched across the Bifrost Bridge, heading to the frost giants' planet, Jotunheim. However, they were stopped by Heimdall, Asgard's gatekeeper. Heimdall, with his all-seeing eyes, could perceive everything in the 9 realms. He was also curious as to how the frost giants had slipped past his watchful gaze. In the end, Heimdall decided to let Thor and his companions go to Jotunheim to uncover the truth. Passing through the space-time tunnel, Thor and his group arrived in the cold, dark, and ruined land of Jotunheim. As soon as they appeared, they were surrounded by frost giants. Frost giant King Laufey bluntly accused that all of this was caused by a traitor in Odin's family and blamed them for the downfall of his kingdom. The situation escalated, and soon a fierce battle broke out. Thor, wielding Mjolnir, clashed fiercely with the frost giants, while his comrades drew their weapons and bravely fought the enemy.
Directed by...
At least make it a challenge for me.
However, the frost giants' relentless ranged attacks and fearless spirit soon began to cause serious trouble for Thor's group, and they found themselves struggling. In this battle, Thor displayed his bravery and fearlessness as a warrior. He swung Mjolnir like a bolt of thunder from the heavens, smashing through the frost giants one by one, but his comrades began to tire. Loki is captured and poisoned by the frost giants, but surprisingly, Loki's poison arm recovers quickly. This shocking sight left Loki both unsettled and confused, and he began to question his identity and origins. At the critical moment, Thor and his companions quickly organized a retreat, but they were relentlessly pursued by the frost giants.
I don't want to think about live beneath Jabba the...
That they have these things, why?
Stick in our memories more prominently! Got shish kebab.
Wait, damn it, Thor has the key!
Cornered at the edge of a cliff, they had no choice but to call for Heimdall's help. Yet, no matter how they cried out, the Bifrost Bridge did not appear. All that responded were the roars and claws of a monstrous beast. Just as the situation seemed dire, Thor swung Mjolnir and charged at the beast, piercing it in an instant before landing gracefully. However, the danger was far from over. The frost giants had them completely surrounded. In this moment of despair, the Bifrost Bridge suddenly descended from the sky. King Odin had come personally. Odin looked at his reckless son, his eyes filled with weariness and disappointment. He pleaded quietly with Laufey, hoping that, considering they were still just children, he would cease the war.
These are the actions of a boy. Treat them as such. You and I can end this here now, before there's further bloodshed.
We are beyond diplomacy now, Allfather. He'll get what he came for. War and death.
So be it.
Odin had no choice but to forcibly rescue them. However, Thor was furious and dissatisfied with what he perceived as his father's weakness. Seeing the anger on Thor's face, Odin was filled with helplessness and disappointment. He knew Thor was not ready to be king, that his arrogance and pride would only bring disaster to Asgard. In a fit of anger, Odin banished Thor from Asgard for treason and stripped him of all his powers. Odin then placed a spell on Mjolnir, declaring that only those who were pure of heart and worthy would be able to lift the hammer and wield the power of thunder. He then cast Mjolnir into the Bifrost Bridge, sending Thor to face the trials of fate and growth. All of this was part of Loki's plan. It was Loki who had secretly reported Thor's actions to Odin, ensuring Thor's exile, while he seized the opportunity to claim the throne. Yet, Loki had a more pressing matter to attend to. He needed to find out why the frost giant's poison had no effect on him. He must investigate his true identity and background, as well as the grievances between himself and Asgard. As Loki prepared to uncover the mystery of his lineage, holding the casket of ancient winters in his hands, Odin's voice came from behind him. Under Loki's pressing questions, Odin finally let down his guard and revealed the deeply buried secret. It was a shadow from a war that spanned millennia. Odin had not only taken the ancient and mysterious casket of ancient winters, but he had also found the abandoned baby Loki in a dark corner of the palace. Loki was the son of the frost giants. The moment Odin saw Loki, his heart stirred with compassion. He allowed the innocent child to live, hoping that by doing so, he could secure peace between the two realms. From that moment on, he raised Loki as his own son. However, what Odin saw as deep fatherly love, Loki viewed as a cruel joke. Lies may temporarily blind the eyes, but the truth is as sharp as a blade, cutting straight to the heart. Loki felt that he was nothing more than a pawn in his father's quest to rule the universe. No wonder he had always sensed his father's indescribable favoritism towards Thor. No matter how hard he tried, the glory of the throne always seemed out of reach. Facing his son's misunderstanding and resentment, Odin's eyes were filled with helplessness and exhaustion. He weakly tried to explain that everything he had done was to protect Loki from the harsh reality of the truth. But by now Odin's days were numbered. Thor had been banished from his home, and the kingdom was in desperate need of a new guardian. As he watched his father's frail figure slowly collapse, Loki's heart was torn by a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, and a faint but undeniable sense of panic.
Gods!
Loki quickly summoned the guards to take his father for treatment, while he, in the midst of this sudden turn of events, rightfully ascended to Asgard's throne.
My king, we would ask that you end Thor's banishment.
My first command cannot be to undo the All-Father's last. We're on the brink of war with Jotunheim. Our people need a sense of continuity in order to feel safe in these difficult times. All of us must stand together for the good of Asgard.
Yes, of course.
Loki's first priority as the new king was to find the missing Thor. After being exiled by Odin, Thor landed in New Mexico, where he unexpectedly encountered 3 scientists studying anomalous phenomena. They initially intended to take this unexpected visitor, who had fallen from the sky, to the hospital for a medical examination. However, they were shocked to discover that the myths and fantastical stories Thor spoke of were far beyond their imagination.
Father! I know you can hear me! Open the Bifrost!
Hospital, you go. I'll stay.
You, what realm is this? Alfheim? Dornheim?
New Mexico?
You dare threaten me, Thor, with so puny a weapon?
Leading them to mistakenly believe that Thor was mentally unstable. Darcy, nervous, raised her taser, ready to deal with any potential threat. Yet Thor, once the mighty god of thunder, now seemed so vulnerable. Under the insistence of the 3 scientists, Thor was taken to the hospital. However, even without his divine powers, Thor maintained the pride and stubbornness of a god. In this unfamiliar environment surrounded by strange people, Thor mistakenly thought he was being kidnapped, and using his formidable physique, he knocked down the doctors and security guards who tried to approach him. It wasn't until the cold syringe pierced his skin that Thor realized his weakness and vulnerability. Yet even then, he didn't give up trying to escape. Using his flexibility, Thor managed to slip free of his restraints and regain his freedom. But fate, it seems, has a way of playing tricks on people. No sooner had Thor escaped from the hospital than he was hit by the car of the same 3 scientists. While sorting through their research data, they had discovered that Thor had been at the center of last night's magnetic storm, so they decided to bring him back for further questioning.
What is this?
Oh, my ex.
This mortal form has grown weak. I need sustenance.
From the locals, Thor learned a shocking piece of news: a mysterious object was hidden in the desert, and it was none other than his Mjolnir. It turned out that when Odin exiled Thor to Earth, Mjolnir had also fallen along with him. A local resident had stumbled upon Mjolnir, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't budge the hammer an inch. Unwilling to accept defeat, he even organized a local hammer pulling party, calling in strongmen from the area to try their luck. But whether it was the town sheriff or renowned strongmen, all were defeated by the immovable hammer. Even using iron chains to tie the hammer to a pickup truck and pulling with all their strength, they couldn't move it an inch. Now, Thor must reclaim what is rightfully his to prove his worth and ability. But he's faced with a harsh reality: his mortal body can't cover the vast distance to the desert on its own. Thor asked Jane to drive him there, but Dr. Eric warned her that it would be too dangerous.
I'm sorry, but I can't take you.
And this is where we say goodbye. Jane Foster, Eric Selvig, Darcy, farewell. Back to work.
Reluctantly, Jane had to say goodbye to Thor. Thor entered a pet store, hoping to purchase a fine steed, but the shopkeeper thought he was just looking for trouble. At that moment, Jane happened to drive by, bringing a glimmer of hope for Thor. Just moments ago, Jane was furious after S.H.I.E.L.D. confiscated her research data. In her efforts to confront S.H.I.E.L.D. and get her materials back, she happened to give Thor a ride. However, when they arrived at the desert, they found that the area was heavily guarded by S.H.I.E.L.D. Thor, desperate, charged into the base without hesitation, relying on his exceptional combat skills and his deep desire for Mjolnir. Thor fought his way through and finally arrived at Mjolnir's location.
Wait, I want to see this.
But this once easily wielded weapon now felt as heavy as a mountain. Thor tried with all his might, but he couldn't lift it. In that moment, Thor realized that he had lost more than just his powers. He had lost his father's trust, his expectations, and perhaps the door to Asgard, the home he once knew, had been closed to him forever. Defeated, Thor was easily captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. Before being taken away, Thor cast one last glance at his former comrade, Mjolnir. His eyes were filled with despair.
You made my men, some of the most highly trained professionals in the world, look like a bunch of minimum wage mall cops. Why don't you tell me where you received your training? Pakistan? Chechnya? Afghanistan? One way or another, we find out what we need to know. We're good at that.
But fate wasn't done with Thor yet. Loki, now acting as king, found Thor and spun a lie, claiming that Thor's reckless actions had caused their father's death. He said their home was on the brink of war, and even their beloved mother had refused to allow Thor to return.
I'm so sorry.
No. I am sorry. Thank you for coming here.
Farewell.
Satisfied, Loki left Thor to drown in his despair. With these 3 crushing blows, Thor's world seemed to crumble. He reflected on his former pride and arrogance, which now seemed laughable and pathetic. But thankfully, the 3 scientists had not given up on him. Dr. Eric used forged documents to claim Thor was mentally unstable, allowing him to rescue Thor from S.H.I.E.L.D. Thor also managed to sneak away their confiscated research materials and return them to Jane. Under the soft glow of the moon, Thor opened up to Jane, sharing stories about his homeland and the 9 realms. Those Norse myth-like legends became vivid and real as they flowed from his lips. A pure, gentle affection began to blossom between them, but while they were lost in the romance of the moment, Loki had already struck a deal with the Frost Giants. Loki promised to help them infiltrate Asgard and assassinate Odin in exchange for the Frost Giants' support, and he vowed to return the casket of ancient winters that rightfully belonged to them once their plan succeeded.
Accept.
But this seemingly perfect plan did not escape Heimdall's notice. As the gatekeeper, though he had no concrete evidence, he sensed that it was Loki who had secretly brought the Frost Giants into Asgard, defying the orders of the new king. Loki. Heimdall secretly gathered Thor's friends and opened the Bifrost Bridge for them, sending them to Earth. On Earth's streets, these heroes, dressed in strange garb, drew the attention of both the locals and S.H.I.E.L.D. With the help of their divine senses, they quickly and effortlessly located Thor. Their arrival was like a beacon of light in the darkness, reigniting the hope and fighting spirit within Thor. They revealed the truth to Thor that his father had only fallen into a coma and had not died. Only then did Thor realize the truth. His father's anger had not been as severe as he'd thought, nor had it cast him out forever. Everything was part of Loki's carefully crafted lie.
Ensure my brother does not return.
Their plan had long been exposed under Loki's sharp gaze, so he sent the Destroyer, a ruthless killing machine, across the stars, vowing to annihilate Thor and his companions on Earth. The Destroyer descended upon Earth with thunderous force, only to unexpectedly encounter an ambush from S.H.I.E.L.D. The moment it appeared, its heavy armor was mistaken by Coulson for one of Tony Stark's latest Iron Man suits, but the Destroyer struck swiftly, its immense power taking S.H.I.E.L.D.'s elite agents by surprise. A thick atmosphere of death and destruction blanketed the small town. As the disaster unfolded, everyone quickly mobilized. Thor and the scientists rushed to evacuate the innocent townspeople. Meanwhile, Thor's 4 closest friends stepped forward, vowing to stall the Destroyer's advance. Volstagg, the brave berserker, charged in first. With fearless resolve, he leaped toward the Destroyer. Though his attack did not stop the enemy, it created an opening for the warrior Sif to launch a surprise strike. Yet, against the nearly unstoppable power of the Destroyer, all strategies seemed futile.
Now, run!
They were bombarded by Destroyer's laser cannons and fell into an unprecedented situation. But in this life and death moment, Thor displayed the leadership and courage of a true king. He knew of Loki's ambition, and he understood that he must stand up to protect this land and the innocent people of Earth.
Brother, whatever I have done to wrong you, whatever I have done to lead you to do this, I am truly sorry. But these people are innocent. Taking their lives will gain you nothing. So take mine and end this.
Destroyer suddenly attacked and knocked Thor to the ground with a slap, dying. However, Thor's self-sacrificing act deeply moved his father, Odin. He He sensed his son's growth and transformation, finally acknowledging Thor's worthiness to be the god of thunder. Mjolnir soared into the air, like a warrior summoned to battle, flying straight into Thor's hand. In an instant, lightning flashed and thunder roared, with the honor and blessings of his ancestors pouring into Thor. It was as if Thor had been reborn. His strength multiplied. With a single swing of his hammer, he effortlessly brought down the once unstoppable destroyer. Thor then soared into the sky, wielding Mjolnir, and unleashed a powerful whirlwind that swept the destroyer into the air. Finally, with the force of thunder, Thor dove down and destroyed the mighty enemy that had threatened Earth. After the crisis was averted, Thor and his companions prepared to return to their homeland, Asgard. However, when they called for the Bifrost Bridge, it did not appear. It turned out that Loki had frozen and sealed Heimdall, accusing him of treason for disobeying the king's orders and sending Thor's friends to Earth. Loki personally led the frost giant king, Laufey, into Odin's recovery chamber. Just as Laufey was about to strike a fatal blow, a beam of light shot from behind. It was Loki, stepping in to eliminate Laufey at the last moment. At that moment, Thor arrived and exposed Loki's treachery. Heimdall had broken free from his icy prison and opened the Bifrost Bridge, bringing Thor and his companions back to Asgard. Faced with his brother's anger and accusations, Loki knew the tide had turned against him, and the brothers engaged in battle. But Loki wasn't focused on the fight. He had a far greater scheme in motion. Wielding Odin's staff, Loki turned the Bifrost Bridge into an unstoppable weapon, aiming it straight at the heart of Jotunheim's sky. Loki's goal was to harness the power that could shake the stars and unleash a flood of destruction, obliterating the enemy's stronghold. By doing so, he hoped to prove to Odin that only he was worthy of the throne. Thor's experiences on Earth had taught him the true lesson his father Odin had tried to impart. A true king isn't measured by how much land he conquers, but by how much peace he preserves. The clash of ideals between the brothers was like thunder and lightning. Their argument indoors escalated into a fierce battle outside, with each strike shaking the heavens and the earth. Though Thor had the upper hand, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of mercy toward his brother Loki. But it was all part of Loki's trap. Taking advantage of Thor's compassion, Loki launched a surprise attack from behind. Loki multiplied into countless illusions, mocking Thor's naivety and mercy. Yet in the face of overwhelming power, Loki's tricks proved futile. Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir, shattered the illusions and pinned Loki to the ground, immobilizing him. But Loki remained calm, for he knew his plan was nearly complete. The energy of the Bifrost Bridge had reached its peak and was about to unleash its devastating force. Thor was powerless to stop it. In this moment of despair, Thor made a bold and fateful decision. He called Mjolnir not to strike Loki, but to smash the Bifrost Bridge beneath their feet. Thor knew he couldn't halt the release of energy, but he could destroy its source.
What are you doing?
With Thor's final strike, the Bifrost Bridge was shattered. The unleashed energy raged like a tidal wave, engulfing both Thor and Loki. The brothers plummeted from the clouds, their fate uncertain, but a newly awakened Odin appeared just in time to save them. But Loki's heart had already been completely frozen by their father's cold rejection.
I could have done it, Father! I could have done it! For you! For all of us!
No, Loki.
Loki, no!
Releasing his grip on the staff, Loki chose self-exile, disappearing into the vast reaches of the universe. Asgard held a grand feast and celebration. Amid the laughter and joy, Thor couldn't hide the loneliness in his heart. He had lost his beloved brother and could no longer return to Earth to be with the one he loved. But during this journey of a king's awakening, Thor realized that the true path of a king is not built on the bones of his enemies, but on a heart of compassion and the responsibility to protect the peace beneath the clouds. The movie ends here. In the post-credits scene, Dr. Erik Selvig is invited by S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury to study the Tesseract, in hopes of harnessing its limitless energy. But from a nearby mirror, it's clear that Dr. Selvig's mind has already fallen under Loki's control. A massive conspiracy is about to unfold. The story of the Avengers is about to begin. See you next time, with even more excitement waiting for you.